I'm Josh Allen, and welcome to the Baked In Podcast, where I sit down with industry innovators to uncover the unique ideas and values that are baked into their businesses and have led to extraordinary success. This podcast is presented by Busey Bank. Since Busey opened their doors in 1868, they've upheld a pledge to foster customer relationships and vibrant communities, embodying a legacy of partnership and progress. With multiple lines of business, Busey provides a range of financial solutions tailored to your needs. From digital banking to planning for retirement, Busey is here to help you achieve your financial goals. Busey Bank, building business, growing wealth since 1868. This week, we're telling an unusually honest manufacturing story, how a legacy candy got shelved by a giant and then came back without sanding off the edges that made it special. The brand is Switzer's Licorice. Born in St. Louis in 1888 when Frederick M. Switzer turned street cart candy into a company that would become a national licorice leader built on real licorice extract and a denser, chewier bite. Through the 20th century, Switzer grew big, then disappeared into corporate portfolios, ultimately landing at Hershey in the 1990s, where it conflicted with Twizzlers and St. Louis production was shut down, effectively discontinuing the brand. Fast forward to 2005, the founders' grandsons, Michael and Joe Switzer, reintroduced the brand at the All Candy Expo in Chicago, aiming for authenticity over scale, cherry red and old-fashioned black back on the shelves, distributed through nostalgia-friendly channels. Today, we've got Dan Warner, Switzer's managing CEO, on the Revival Playbook, and Jim Clark, a factory veteran, on the craft. The texture windows, the batch judgment, and the choices you make when you refuse to modernize away the soul of a candy. Let's roll. So Dan, take me to 2005 at the All Candy, I think it's called the All Candy Expo, was in Chicago at the time, when you kind of made this official comeback. What had to be true to you to believe that the brand sort of deserved a second life and not just sort of a nostalgic rebrand?
I had been in a retail business, and I was looking for something to do that was authentically St. Louis. It was an old record store that I was in, and I enjoyed the fact that it was authentic and original to St. Louis.
Webster Records.
Yeah. Love that. And Mike Switzer came into the store, and he said, I think, I've got an opportunity if you're interested in joining Switzers Candy Company. First, I came in as an investor, passive, active, but not actively day to day. And then as I got more interested in it, I decided I'm going to take this on with Mike and his brother Joe at that time. And they had technically already gone to that show, but I know about the show. The show took place in Chicago, and Mike, in his famous advertising background way, made a big splash there with the show. And it really got us out in the world in front of these buyers from major chains. And one of the buyers at that point was with Cracker Barrel. And Cracker Barrel brought us in a huge way. We were going to be their promotion that they would promote on the tabletops of all their dining facilities along with their stores. We'd be placed right up front. And it got us flying out the door the very first year. The thing that attracted me to it is this was what I grew up with in St. Louis, was brands like Switzers Candy. And I felt that that's important to keep those brands alive. And so the attraction to me was, this is a chance to get in on a brand that I grew up with and try to make a difference, try to continue it, try to make it bigger. It had been very large.
Right. But you're not exactly the atypical food manufacturing CEO. You came in with you were part of Big 8 accounting firm, right?
Right.
For a long time in accounting.
Right.
Webster Records, you sort of understood small nostalgic brands, but it's a pretty interesting choice to make with this launch to bring somebody like you in.
I think I've read this about you. I think sometimes you're better off when you begin something like this going in with a little ignorance, a little optimism, and feeling I can take this on. I will learn what I need to learn. And that was the case here. I was fairly young at the time still. It was going to take years. We knew it wasn't going to be an overnight success. It was going to take time. We were basically pioneering the brand again out into the marketplace. So we were going to have to make inroads that had been, vacant for decades. And so I thought this is going to be, it's not only going to be a challenge, it's going to be a fun challenge, because I think bread's the same way. When you go out and people try what you make and they love it, it's just a way for you to share what you love with them. And I felt licorice and candy is the same kind of thing. People are eating candy because when they want to be happy, or they already are happy.
So the brand had passed through a couple of different corporate owners before Hershey got it. Hershey, because of Twizzlers, sort of decided that they were going to discontinue it and let it go. What did you guys see, you and the brothers see, that you think they missed, that sort of gave you this leaning towards bringing this brand back?
They were too big to care about what was really a small portion of their licorice business. With it falling off the shelves, that's really what motivated me. If they'd kept it on the shelves, I would have felt like Switzer was still being available to the public, was still out there in the public. With it falling off the radar and potentially going away forever, that was the incentive for me, was to get involved in something, to bring back something that was very important to the credibility or the image of St. Louis. To me, it was Anheuser-Busch, Budweiser beer, Switzer licorice. There's other brands too that are wholly St. Louis brands and what we grew up with. I didn't necessarily think we were ever going to be anywhere near the size of Twizzler or American, and we aren't. But I thought it was important to save that brand for the future, for the future generations.
So what are you guys doing harder on purpose to sort of stay true to the authenticity and make sure that you don't just become the same modern licorice in a nostalgic package?
Well, we learned lessons. Of course, we learned lots of lessons. And we had somebody else making our licorice for us. That has limitations on its own in many ways. We couldn't sell into certain customers that required quicker turnarounds. We couldn't sell into customers that needed certain flavors or certain design or shapes. We were limited to what they made. And there aren't many manufacturers of licorice that do co-packing. So we spent 20 years doing it that way. And it wasn't until after we only got to a certain plateau. It was a nice sized plateau. We were happy with our sales, but we weren't making new inroads because we weren't that differentiated from our competition. And it was only after COVID and after some changes during COVID on availability of product and production time and all the chaos that kind of came along with that we sat down and we thought, why are we so dependent on somebody else's standard when we know Switzer was a better standard? It was the best standard. And, at one point it was the largest selling licorice in America up until like the 80s, early 80s. And part of that decline happened because of the production method changed. The original production method was a batch method. So it was more time consuming, it took more steps, it took more labor, but it produced a better chew and a much better flavor. And that's what built this company. It's what built the licorice, the credibility or the nostalgia about this licorice was different than what you could buy with other larger licorice companies.
And I think what you guys did really, really well is the guy sitting next to you is bringing Jim into this, who has the manufacturing background, the tribal knowledge of the manufacturing practice before eliminating the batch production. So Jim, let me ask you that question. Sort of, if as somebody who doesn't know enough about licorice, what's the difference between what you guys want to produce and what Red Vines and Twizzlers do every day?
Well, I think Twizzlers is quite different from Red Vines, and the Switzer Cherry was different from all three. And during the time when I was hired, I was to document the kettle cook method before they moved to their fast cooking method that they had in mind.
So just as a reminder, or for everybody's benefit, they produced licorice from 1888 until 1998, 110 years continuous on basically Laclede's Landing and downtown on the riverfront. But when did the change that you're talking about take place? Or when did you start there, and then when did this change?
I started there in 1975 to be their first quality control manager. They hadn't had one. Licorice manufacturing, it's a very stable product. And they didn't have the trouble like they would have with chocolates or other kind of companies. So the employees were the quality control people. But I was there to document how they made the candies this kettle-cooked way, because if the new process didn't work out, they wanted to have the knowledge to go back to the way that had made Switzer the #1 brand during the decades of the 50s and 60s. I was a customer in junior high way back then. And as a customer, I thought the Switzer bar gave me a lot more long-lasting chew for the money.
And when you say the bar, you're talking about the one where the licorice together, where you peel off the vines, basically?
You could peel it.
You guys call that a bar? I didn't know that was called a bar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or some, in the trade it's called maybe a count good.
Okay.
But I would collect soda bottles. You know, people that didn't have much money, that's how the kids way back in my time were able to buy their sodas and their candies. So you looked at the candy in front of you. There were chocolates, which were wonderful. They didn't last long. But the Switzer bar did. And it really had a whole lot of flavor. So I was a fan of the Switzer bar from early on. So I was there in 75 to document the change. And you said something about tribal notions or so forth.
Tribal knowledge. That's what we call it when somebody has the information in their head, but you haven't, but it's hard to communicate that, or it hasn't been documented on paper or in formulas. So it's the nuances of, for us, it's when is the product ready to go into dividing? When is the bread ready to go in the oven? When, like, how do you score it? All of that stuff becomes sort of tribal knowledge that you just have to make sure that it just doesn't stick in a couple people's heads, and if they decide to leave or retire or whatever happens, that you lose that knowledge. And so
quite important, yes.
Right.
I thought you were talking about tribal knowledge in the way of some of the stories that a company acquires over the time. Some of the legends, how the employees talk about things in the past that could or could not be true, but it becomes part of the factory.
The lore, right?
Yeah.
Lore, yes. I did enjoy that as well as documenting the situation. But, well, for instance, one tribal thing was that the Murphys would not tell the Switzers what the formulas were. The Murphys were the candy makers, and the Switzers were the salespeople. And the Murphys was afraid if they find out what the formula is, they're going to try to make it cheaper. But Murphys married some Switzers, and the secrets came out. And then during Prohibition, the basement of the Switzer building at 612 First Street was off limits to employees except for a handful of maintenance people and sanitation people.
And what happened in the basement?
Well, they had sugar and they had molasses and they had some interesting ingredients.
Gotcha.
And the maintenance people involved in that knew that if they had a raid at the plant, they would lose their jobs. Switzer upper management would be shocked, just absolutely shocked that was going on in their plant. So I loved a lot of those stories. But it turned out indeed that the change to the new fast process, in fact, the old process, I think.
So when you say the fast process, just quickly, what is the difference? So before you were mixing batches
in huge kettles that hold over a ton of ingredients. It took about 3 hours to cook it.
So about 2,000 pound batch, basically.
Oh, twice that.
Twice that. Okay, that's the old method.
The old method.
Okay.
And then that would be put into tubs to gel, and then it would be extruded on the trays, which would go on the racks. Indeed, if you saw the Switzer plant operating back there in about 1975, it'd be somewhat familiar to your bakery. Lots and lots of racks on wheels.
Sure.
Lots of trays, lots of product on those trays. And but the new process would go through a very high pressure cooker so that the mix would be made, go through this very high pressure quick cooker.
So instead of 3 hours, it was.
Instead of 3 hours cooking, it's about 5 minutes to cook it.
Really?
And instead of 3 days to make the product, it would go directly to the extruder, and then out of the extruder onto a plastic coated canvas belt, through a cooling tunnel, and then right up into the packaging machines. So maybe less than 2 hours after the mix was made, it was in a package.
versus 36 hours before.
versus 3 days.
Right. Oh, 72. Yeah, right. So what was the difference?
Well,
Was it obvious to the consumer? Like, did the consumer immediately know that they changed?
Yes, the
Yes.
consumer did detect the change. They changed the formula to fit this new cooking process. They changed the flavor, changed the shape of the candy.
Because originally it was real cherry, right? Like real cherry extract or
No, it was an artificial cherry.
always.
Always an
Okay, so
I
that's
guess-
part of the lore. See, like the interwebs led me to believe that it was real cherry.
There was a time, I guess, when Mr. Switzer didn't want to make the cherry, that wasn't real licorice. Much like I heard Gussie Bush did not want to make a light beer, and the light beer had to be developed in secret. So
So really, after that change is when the brand started to sort of.
Yes,
Now,
we-
Beatrice Foods owned it at the time, right?
Right.
So there was pressure probably from upper management to save costs, to
Profits.
change profits
Right.
and everything
the
else.
Switzer brand lost 66% of its customers after about 2 years.
Really, that
And
quickly?
those customers went to Twizzler, they went to American Licorice. So
Because there wasn't any at that point. There was no longer any real difference between those, right?
Right.
So what are you guys think? What are you doing now? Like, are you back to batch production now?
That's where our dream is.
That's
Go
the
back
dream.
to batch production.
Yeah, our goal is we're looking for a production partner here. We've been looking for about a year to find a production partner in St. Louis.
Because and you're looking now 20 years after the relaunch because the volume is there. It starts to make sense.
We had to learn a lot of lessons. There's more to just the licorice itself. We had to learn how to market the licorice. We had to learn how to get ourselves in stores, shelving costs, slotting costs, all of that. When you're in the middle of that, and we're learning so much anyway, the licorice, while it was important, taking on a manufacturing learning curve was going to be much greater. So
I do a lot of co-manufacturing now, so I could make the arguments on the other side, right? No capex investment, you can find a partner quickly to market.
Yeah.
If you find somebody with the right minimums, you're just not making that huge commitment, but you're reaching a point where you're unable to find a quality co-manufacturer
right, that would make it. I think I'd like to back up. So I think we were happy enough getting our product back on shelves, and it was good enough that people were liking it enough. I think when COVID hit and we had a little bit of a stutter there, it made me think, why are we dependent on another manufacturer when we could be making this ourselves or have a really close relationship, ownership almost relationship with the manufacturer? And that's when I reached out to Jim again, and I said, Jim, let's build a test kitchen that we can prove that this tastes better. It's one thing to say, I remember it tasting better. It's one thing to say, yeah, it was the largest selling licorice. But when you can hand somebody a licorice bar that was just made in the new, or the old batch method, in a new facility method that we were looking for, that would convince people. It convinced me. When Jim brought the first black licorice, original licorice bar over to me, I cannot detect any difference between that and the original bar that I remember growing up with. It's perfect.
So so for those of us that don't know, what's the distinguishing character? Is it the mouthfeel, the chew, the flavor? Like, what's different about real licorice made in batch production versus Twizzlers?
I think it's the mouthfeel, the
mouthfeel.
chew, the texture in the mouth is so important.
And it's what? It's chewier, it's denser,
It needs to be a smooth chew, not sticking to your teeth. Sticking to your teeth is a pretty significant negative to me.
okay.
And then the flavor is, it's a
flavor's
flavor
amazing.
that's been popular for so many maybe about 1,000 years.
Yeah.
No, it's like somebody asking you what does sourdough bread taste like without tasting sourdough bread. So I understand how it's a hard question, but I'm interested, like, sort of how you guys think about what the difference is and why it's so valuable to either build your own factory or find the right co-man to do that.
But if you taste American licorice, to me, it doesn't have very much of a fruit flavor. It's a kind of chemically like flavor. And the Twizzler, to me, isn't a strawberry flavor. It's more like a banana type flavor. So there are differences between those two products and a big difference in texture between Twizzler and American. But people on the West Coast grew up eating American, and you can't quite take
What's the opposite of American? When you say American, what's the what's the others? What's the
American red vines is
American red vines
is
okay.
owned by
I
American.
thought you meant like German versus like where it came from.
So being a Switzer person, I can say American red vines taste terrible and has an undercooked quality to it.
Okay.
And I thought Twizzler was kind of waxy like, and it broke up too much in your when you chewed it. It broke apart too fast. So this is just looking at the competition in a negative way, I guess. I'm a Switzer fan.
As an offside, just because I just want to think about it, how big is the licorice market?
It's huge. It's over $1 billion.
It is.
Yeah, it's huge.
Still, even today, like that has
It continues to grow because it's an less expensive candy treat, and there are more people in licorice than there ever were before. You have the Australians, you have the Northern European licorice companies, you have the American licorice companies. It's an accepted, and licorice also, it's a little bit of a misnomer because licorice also includes fruit flavor. Licorice originally was black, original anise flavored licorice root, that was licorice. But since those days, the cherries become more popular than the black licorice. And all the fruit flavors that have come with that. So it's growing as a category because of that. But yeah, it's a very, I like to think that if we just got 1% of that market, 2% of the market, you have a nice sized company.
Sure.
You don't need a lot of it. And it's a big category that's accepted by the American consumer as a candy they like to buy.
So Jim, as you think about the ideal way to manufacture this, what are the non-negotiables if you're looking for a co-manufacturer or even to do it yourself? What are the things that you say we have to do, no compromise, in order to produce the Switzers that you want to make?
To me, it just has to be a kettle cook process. Twizzlers made in kettles. American licorice is made in kettles. This fast cooking method is a disaster. So to me, a non-negotiable is to be kettle cooked. And maybe another non-negotiable is it really has the licorice extract in it, and it has molasses in it, and anise oil. I need those three flavors there in the black.
And the quote-unquote fast method, did they find synthetic replacements for all of that stuff? Is there no molasses in there, or like, was that the detriment to the black licorice?
They did keep molasses and the sugars. They changed the amount of flour in the candy. Flour is a significant ingredient in licorice. To me, should remain that way. A little bit of cornstarch is added to the red, but
okay.
Flour is quite important.
Are you developing the gluten in the mix? Like, is that part of the chew, and is that what goes away with the fast process?
The starch granules in the flour have to swell and open up and break apart in the chains, and then it has to sit while those chains kind of interconnect to form a gel, and then that can be extruded.
Is that based on the hydration? Are you adding water to it? Is water an ingredient?
Well, we cook it with a lot of water. We evaporate a lot of it during cooking.
Okay.
But then after it's extruded, it has to be dried more, from about 30% moisture down to about 17% moisture. And you'd probably know what I'm talking about when I say the flour is a second clear flour.
Okay, sure. I mean, it's just fascinating to think about all this different stuff. So the kettle cooking is a non-negotiable.
Not kettle cooking.
You've been able to find
It's a
co-manufacturers that do kettle cooking, or you're not even finding that?
We're not finding that because they're looking to the
Is there a point where you would build your own factory? Is that on the table?
I would love to work with people that want to build a factory in St. Louis. I've talked with people outside of St. Louis. There has been some interest. I don't know if it's going to go down that road. I'd rather it not. I'd rather it stay in St. Louis because it began here, it belongs here, and it's a St. Louis success story.
Sure.
So I think we should be able.
How big of a space do you need?
Like 30,000 square feet.
So it's not a
huge
commitment.
Right.
Dan's thought is to start with just two items, a red bar and a black bar. You can't find black licorice bars in the market anymore. The competitors have gone away from that. And Twizzler has gone away from the 2.5 ounce size to the 4.2 ounce size. So they went to there's two tiers of bars now, larger, more expensive ones, and the traditional size, 1.6 ounce. So Twizzlers has left that spot open if we could take advantage of it. Of course, they could come back in the market if we were successful, but
No. I think it's really about getting the brand back in production and letting the brand take off on its own again. I think it would grow. I think the differentiation would be important enough for people to be a little bit more expensive than the other brands out there. But the important thing is that the experience is better and that people will pay more for something they view as better.
Right. And the opportunity for premium, you don't have to grow. I mean, you have to grow, but you don't. You can be intentionally small
Exactly.
and make it work.
Exactly. And there are lots of distribution channels today that we didn't have even 20 years ago.
Yeah, where is candy sold today for the most? I mean, where is premium candy sold? I guess like when I know you mentioned Cracker Barrel. I know you're in Target, regional grocery stores. Like, is that how do you envision the market kind of evolving for you as you look ahead?
I think the specialty stores like Cracker Barrel and
They sell a heck of a lot.
World
of candy,
Food
don't they?
Markets. That was another.
World Food, sure, World Market. Yeah,
World Market. Yeah, they sell a lot of licorice from around the world, and I think we would fit in there. But something today is Amazon has changed the way people find the brands they're looking for. If they in the old days, you had to have distributors that would distribute. So you'd have all these layers. You'd all have all this shipping that would go between the manufacturer and the final store where it was sold at. Today, you can reach people through the internet, through Amazon, for example, and get out into parts of America would be very expensive to distribute to.
Sure. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and then I sort of want to talk about sort of where you're going and where you're headed and how we get this thing across the finish line for you guys to start making this beautiful candy.
Great.
Well, I guess now that Don asked the question, we'll throw it out there if we can. So I'm trying some of this right now. It definitely has a totally different just feel and smell. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful. But talk a little bit about that kind of quickly. Like we had red dye number 40 is going away. So what is there an option? Are you guys thinking about that?
Well, my approach to it is it's going away for all of us. So the industry's going to change. And like Jim was saying, that there's some other colors that are not on the unapproved list that it could go. So you might end up with cherry licorice, but it might be yellow color, or it might be black, or it might be a different color than red because of the limitations on that.
But you can't use beet or
you can't. Some
kind of
yeah,
other
and I think that's what the industry will end up doing is coming to some natural color.
Because it's hard for folks to get the thought of
it is
red out of their head, right?
When it's cherry, absolutely. Right. When it's grape, it's going to be a purple color. You have to sort of match the color with the flavor.
Right. This stuff is delicious, by the way. It is exactly what I remember as a kid. So, kind of getting to that. Before we leave from that, you've kind of chosen to stay right-sized. And even if you go into manufacturing for yourself or whatever your next step is, do you have a thought of what right-sized is for Switzers and even as you look to the future?
Right-sized in a total sales company?
Yeah, I mean, is there, so that you can stay true to the authenticity, so that you can stay true to the brand, so that you can deliver the product that you want to deliver. Is there a niche within that isn't just chasing revenue?
Boy, I don't, because it used to be very large and was staying true to its original production method. It's only when it got sold to a conglomerate did they get away from family traditions and go with corporate traditions.
So when it had all that market share in the 50s and 60s, did Twizzlers and American exist? Was that?
Yeah, they did.
They were just
They're small.
Eating the heck out of them.
They were
the
Switzer had established itself very well in the market as the licorice company, and these other companies were there. They were more regionalized and they grew into more national size companies. And it was because Switzer switched away from their original batch method that allowed the consumer to try others. My Switzer isn't what it used to be, so I'm going to try this other one out there. Twizzlers is named to sound like Switzer.
Right.
I mean, they were all coming after Switzer. So where we stand now is, I think you begin as a small company, producing the licorice to its original characteristics, and build a following over a period of a couple of years, and you grow with that. And so I don't know how to really answer right size. Right size is going to depend where the consumer takes it.
Yeah, so I guess I'll ask you, Jim, if you had to slip a note to Dan, never change this, don't modernize this part of it, What would it be that you would want to make sure that was held on to? Is there something that you'd put on that piece of paper to sort of?
Well, I would like to see the product made with the formulas that Switzer had, and the very similar equipment to what Switzer had when I joined him in 1975. I'd like.
Is all that still around and available? I mean, is it sitting in some warehouse somewhere that nobody's using?
A lot of it is used equipment. I mean, licorice technology, the way I think about it, is very old. So a lot of used
Hasn't changed that much?
Hasn't changed that much, no. So there's kettles out there, used kettles out there. There's used extruders. There's a wrapping machine, horizontal flow wrapper. There's several of those for sale. Dan looked into the price of one, and it seemed pretty reasonable, didn't it? $10,000 or something.
Right.
So,
it's not out of reach.
Okay.
The cost, because it's really basic food making equipment. It's not technically that advanced. It's pretty basic, and the downside from the efficiency standpoint is you have more labor, you have longer period between cook and finished product. But those are all, in a premium product, those are all acceptable because that's the reason it stands out. Part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it sort of goes down the path of what's the difference between respecting a brand's heritage and legacy and being trapped by it, right? Like how do you, what do you do with that?
See, I think the legacy is so important to keep. I think that is your differentiation in the marketplace. It's what you can sell the licorice based on. This is the original. This is the authentic Switzers. There's lots of other choices out there. This is what we believe is what licorice should be.
Are there any other little manufacturers doing it across the country?
Not in this country, but there are some in Europe and some Australian. Licorice is made that way. Those are becoming fairly large companies now, though. But I don't know of any small companies like we would be that are making it in the United States.
Yeah.
If there would be down the road a variation to the Switzer cherry and black, I thought that chocolate covered cherry pieces really were very delicious. So, but I doubt that we would get in a new product like that anytime soon.
Well, like we were talking before we showed about Dan Abel from Bissinger's and Chocolate. We could probably bring him into that conversation.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
And make something happen.
He actually made some test batches for us. We took some licorice down to him, and they dipped some in chocolate for us at one of their stores. I don't remember what year that was, and they tasted. We called them cherry tails, is what we called them, chocolate tails, and they were delicious. I think it would even be better because that was the licorice we were making from our co-man. I think they would be even more amazing if it was our licorice, the authentic way with chocolate. Switzer made chocolate licorice too as well, chocolate flavored.
Chocolate flavor, but it was never one of the better sellers.
And what was it Buttermells?
Yeah.
Talk to me about those.
So Switzer began in 1888, and it really began as a Miss Fred Switzer selling other produced candies from other manufacturers in a cart downtown from sidewalk to sidewalk. That grew into the Missouri Candy Company, which he formed with the Murphys, and that's when they started making their own candy. It was not licorice at first; it was Yellow Jackets, Buttermells.
What's a Yellow Jacket?
A Yellow Jacket's like a banana flavored candy, or it's like a taffy almost. Okay. It hasn't been around. I have none to sample, but I just assume, based on the advertising, that's what it was. A Yellow Jacket. Then they made the Buttermells. They made chocolate soldiers.
And Buttermell is kind of like a buttery caramel?
It's a caramel, yes. Okay. It's a delicious caramel. What we actually made them.
I guess I'll ask the same question I asked Dan. Is it caramel or is it caramel to you guys?
I use both words.
I use both interchangeably? Okay.
Tomato,
yeah.
It'll work. And so chocolate soldiers they put in an additive that allowed it to stand up to heat, so it could be shipped, basically. I don't know what it tasted like, but they called it a chocolate soldier because it could stand up to the enemy heat. But then they purchased actually, I can't remember the name of it, a Dayton, Ohio licorice company in around 1918. And they brought all that equipment to St. Louis, and that began the Switzer licorice department. And licorice started out as a pipe and items, 1 cent penny candy items, just small little shapes. And then it moved into the bar, and they were competing against candy bars, the chocolate bars. It was a way to sell it for a nickel instead of a penny. And then it went into bags of bites and sticks, they called them, or twists. And then through World War II, we had the rationing of sugars, so it didn't need as much sugar. So licorice became an item that could be made in abundance and not limited, and that's what really pushed us over. During the war, it grew greatly, and then in the 50s and 60s, it grew greatly to where it was the largest selling licorice in the 1970s in America.
And did the company kind of let the other things go, or?
Yes, it became entirely licorice.
Okay.
Probably by 1950s, and after the war, they didn't go back to make some of those candies they were making because of the popularity of the licorice item.
But you've brought the buttermilk back, or is
we
that...
did. Mike and I decided we thought we wanted to expand, and Cracker Barrel was our customer. They were looking for more things, and so we brought this. We had it made out of Chicago, and it was delicious. And the bag was beautiful. I was really happy with how it turned out. Customers loved it, but it turned out that caramels aren't a year-round item. They tend to be more seasonal, more fall to early winter. Candy apple making and that. So, and there's, we didn't get a ton of distribution, which we needed. Cracker Barrel was very happy with it, but we didn't go further than that. But it was fun. It was kind of neat resurrecting a almost 100-year-old brand and that nobody remembered. Mike and I laughed about how, well, we have, pictures and catalogs and we know it was available, but nobody's around that remembers what they tasted like. So we just looked for the best caramel we could.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think the whole thing is a very honest manufacturing story. That's the part that's so kind of interesting to me, to sort of think about how can you bring that back. And I mean, it's hard, right? Because the pressure is that you sort of have to fit whatever the co-manufacturers are willing to do or capable of doing. You have to figure out if you can squeeze your hopes and dreams into what their capabilities are, or you've got to make this significant investment in a factory to do it yourself. And so you guys have been, obviously there's been this kind of hybrid, because now you've got 20 years of the resurrection, you've got some volume, you've got some distribution, so you wouldn't be starting from scratch.
Right. We've got proof that it works. We're very certain that this would be a successful product, and especially if we could make it to the standards that the company was known for. I have no question that this, and at my age, I'm looking to hand this off to a younger generation that can carry that on the same way I got involved in it 20 years ago, wanting to see this continue, and I'm just hopeful we can find those people that want to do that with us.
Sure. And Jim, have you written all this stuff down? Have you built have we taken the tribal knowledge out of your head and put it on paper?
I have a number of it written down. I gave a presentation on licorice making to the American Candy Association, and I have publications from Mr. Knock at England, who is considered really the top licorice expert at the time. So yeah, I have a lot of data.
Is there I mean, in bread making, there certainly is a new generation of bread baker. I mean, the great thing is you can look around St. Louis, you can look around all across the country, and there are young folks opening small shops. Is there a new generation of candy making? I know chocolates are sort of different, but sort of traditional candy making, is there a revival of that?
It's kind of consolidated. There's not that many people. Mars is so big, Hershey, they buy up the smaller companies, so there's not a lot of diversity right now in candy making in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, I know just from searching YouTube and stuff, there's some fun videos on people that make peppermint twists and some really cool things to watch being made on a small scale level. But it seems like licorice is sort of just a little bit more involved when you have to include in the extruders and sort of when you get into a little bit more equipment and it gets out of the handmade aspect of it.
Can I tell you a tribal Jim story?
Absolutely.
So I'm sitting in my office around 2006, was that? I'm sitting in my office, and up the stairs comes a man with a briefcase and another thing under his other arm.
He had a briefcase this morning when he came in.
He never goes anywhere without his briefcase. And he came in, and I'm on the phone, and I pointed to him, and I said, just a minute. And he puts on my desk a roll of printout, a computer printout, from the Switzer Candy Company in, like, I don't know, 1980 probably. I quickly got off the phone. I said, could you please tell me where you got this? And he goes, I just hated to see anything get thrown away. And I said, what does that mean? He goes, I worked for Switzer for 30 years.
20 years.
You know, pick up the story from there. So he, you know, came to, he didn't want to see the tradition. He didn't want to see Switzer not continue. He had things that he had collected through the years, history and recipes and all that, from the Switzer. And he came the day after you retired from another company, I think.
From Wrigley.
From
Sugar
Wrigley.
Company.
He
Is
felt
that where you went after Switzer's?
That was one of the companies I went to. I went to a company that made gummies, and another company that made Nerds and Sweet Tarts, and that was a Nestle company.
I didn't ask you, and I probably should have.
Wrigley.
Was it hard when they made that transition? I mean, obviously the sales dipped, but as somebody who had come in to be responsible for QA and be responsible for this method of production, and to watch it then just be.
It was very sad to see the decline. It was indeed, and I kind of worried about the future of the factory. But we had something happen that kind of saved the factory. Someone else made a mistake. Good and Plenty is one of the older candy brands in the United States.
Sure.
And I was sent out to the East Coast because they were going to move Good and Plenty production to St. Louis. I was to watch for sabotage. But the people working there weren't hostile to me. They were angry at their R&D and marketing group because they decided they had these complaints about the Good and Plenty centers being hard to chew. So they decided, well, we'll just put a jelly bean center in there, a real tender anise-flavored jelly bean center in there. The buyers of Good and Plenty did not want a jelly bean. So I told my plant manager back in St. Louis what the employees were telling me. He says, don't pay any attention to how they're making the jelly bean center. Just pay attention to how they're coating the center. When it comes to St. Louis, we're going to put that licorice center back in. And that was a wonderful decision. And that was a very profitable item for us here in
So
St.
you brought Good and Plenty's to the factory downtown?
To the downtown factory, to 1600 North Broadway. And that was a real pick-me-up for our factory.
So how long did you stay after the transition from batch to the fast production?
Well, I guess I was there for most of the 20-year period. They're making it with the newer process.
Okay.
Now, Dan said he made buttermilks. One of the things interesting to me was that I was told that Mr. Switzer asked the restaurants in St. Louis, save your rancid butter. I'll buy your rancid butter. I don't think you made your buttermilk.
No, we did not.
I didn't really understand that.
Was that the secret?
Was that the secret to the...
I didn't understand that till I was working for Wrigley. I was assigned to a panel to judge peppermint flavors. And the panel members were telling me, the flavors you're choosing are ones with some rancidity to them. And I realized that I had never really tasted fresh peppermint flavor. It tasted odd to me. Real peppermint flavor was the one they said had some rancidity to it. So, maybe there was a reason for that buttermilk rancid. Because I guess rancid butter back then was a very common flavor.
Probably.
Yeah, maybe so. So, Dan, I guess to kind of close this out, I'd be curious as to your advice for other founders, operators, investors thinking about the revival of a heritage brand and sort of what to look out for from a challenge perspective and what opportunities continue to excite you about where the country is headed in its acceptance of those.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited in one aspect is I think it's easier to get your product distributed nowadays because of Amazon and other ways that people can find you.
Just going direct to consumer.
Go direct to consumer. A lot of industries have gone direct to consumer. So the chances of you getting into the hands of the people that want your product is easier than it was when I started. I think that the challenges are going to be how do you match up to a competitor? How do you get on a shelf in a store? Because you need to be on shelves as well. Sometimes the shelf space is expensive or it's not available. I think the lesson I learned was we should have gone into building our own plant a few years after we started.
Okay.
And actually there was an investor in our company who suggested that many years ago. And he said, one of the things he said is, what happens if your co-packer goes out of business? What happens if they have a fire? You're out of business too. But I think more than that element of it, I think differentiation is the key to making a product. Your bread is better than other breads out there, most other breads out there. So you stand out. You need to have a reason to be on the shelf, not just because you're good at marketing and you can make an attractive bag, or you know how to position it. It ultimately comes down to the quality of the product you put in, and differentiating it from your competitor is key.
Sure. Well, I really appreciate kind of hearing the story and understanding a little bit more, and excited to see what you guys are able to do, especially if you're able to put something together and take on that manufacturing yourself. But Jim, it's a real pleasure and honor to be able to sit and talk to somebody with just so much knowledge and experience. And
Thank you so much.
Really a love. I mean, it's clear that you love what you do.
Oh, my,
and so
yes.
that comes through, right away. And so as somebody who loves what I do, it's really cool to sit down with you. So thank you both for your time this morning, and continued good luck.
Thank you, Josh. We're glad to be here.
Thanks, guys. Thanks so much for joining me today. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed sharing these insights from folks I truly admire. Be sure and follow the show in your favorite podcast player to be alerted to newly released episodes. And share a comment if you have any feedback or future contributor recommendations.